In class structure too, there's the dominance of men in that class. It's like a Venn diagram where you have subsets. So the universal set is that class, two big people in the society are fighting the Senate. But that cultural aspect where men try to dominate women, so it seeps in.
Mm.
And that's why you see some things playing out, in this case where, okay, yeah, men have been historically running things. They're the ones that have had access to power traditionally, but now with the expansion in quote of democracy, and then women too are now chopping, and the women too are wives of the elites and all they're playing parts in the political sphere. This male female dynamics would not seem as brutal as it is to the high class lady.
Right, right.
Because, yeah, what the high class lady will be facing are, I call these things as if you're doing a pillow fight. How
Mhm.
hard can they hit you, But what a lower class woman will be facing, maybe the receptionist at the Senate
Yes, yes, yes.
is a lady is going to face something different from what Natasha is facing.
Yeah, it seems on the table today a multiplicity of potential questions actually and themes because there's been a lot happening in the discourse sphere in Nigeria. Yeah, I mean there's a lot to pick from. There's some topics that are probably much more exciting or intriguing or controversial. And I'm thinking probably about what's happening in the Senate. But I think that we would want to come back to some of these topics with a different cast and crew for various reasons. The Senate issue, Akpabio Gate, in particular, I think probably requires a deep dive. I would just say, I mean, it's a little intriguing that even though it's maybe an obvious point to make, but the fact that he gets called Akpabio and she gets called Natasha is like it's kind of hilarious, isn't it? As in, he gets his last
Mm.
name.
The hyphenated last name long.
Yeah, sure. Maybe that's why. But maybe it's just because, we're used to infantilizing people of a certain gender.
Oh, I meant that not just as reality, but as a way of probing the gender bias
Yeah.
in that in
I,
that
s-
as well.
I suppose some other people will also say, well, um, you're advocating for calling her by a man's name rather than by a woman's name. Um,
Mm.
but yeah, we'll revisit all those debates at a later point, and uh, there'll be much to say, I suspect. And I suppose we have 6 months to have that conversation. Technically,
Maybe
maybe less, maybe less. If
nine, maybe more. Because
okay, right, okay, the suspension might last longer.
here say 6 months now, 6 months now, 6 months based on how the Senate runs. But in
Oh,
reality,
okay, they're
it's
gonna
long.
have a recess.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I know we're kind of having the conversation we're not. We said we're not gonna have, but if that happens, I think they're gonna turn her into a bit of a hero, actually. Probably heroine.
Haven't they already started?
Well,
Because without delving into this, yeah, I mean, you can be hanged, maybe even quartered for having that kind of conversation without, the female representative voice. For me, I don't think it's about male female thing. Yeah, that's the undertone. But we're talking about a class thing here. Two big people they fight. People we don't chop belly. That's how me I see.
yeah.
I'm part
Right.
of.
That is precisely the debate to have. I mean,
Mm,
so since it's kind of seeming like this topic is unavoidable, at the risk of seeming too spontaneous. I mean, OG, you still have an opportunity to disagree here, but I'm kind of like we should have part one of this conversation because there are things to explore here. Gender, who can speak about what topic, the question of course, the question of class and gender, etc. I think there is something that men have to say about patriarchy, right? Even if we cannot definitively address the topic, arguably because of our structural position, I suppose that's something we can also debate. But there is something men have to say about patriarchy. So, what do you think? As our resident feminist correspondent, OAG, how would you address this?
I feel like those things they are intertwined too, because in class structure too, there's the dominance of men in that class. It's like a Venn diagram where you have subsets. So the universal set is that class, two big people in the society are fighting the Senate. But that cultural aspect where men try to dominate women, so it seeps in. And that's why you see some things playing out, in this case where naturally, okay, yeah, men have been historically running things. They're the ones that have had access to power traditionally, but now with the expansion in quote of democracy, and then women too are now chopping, and the women too are wives of the elites and all they're playing parts in the political sphere. This male female dynamics will not seem as brutal as it is to the high class lady.
Right, right.
Because, yeah, what the high class lady will be facing are cushy, like I call these things as if you're doing a pillow fight. How hard can they hit you, But what a lower class woman will be facing, maybe the receptionist at the Senate
Yes, yes, yes.
a lady is going to face something different from what Natasha is facing. So again, it's just a mild subset, of how women, maybe how men will bully her,
Yeah,
but she's still in the big or grand scheme of things. She's still enjoying and she's still a privileged woman anyway, because women are suffering all over the places and they don't have camera or anything or any media coverage. So
yeah,
why is your own different? Why are you a different case from this? Is because of your status in society
yeah.
anyway. So
So
yeah, there's just a little aspect of that in it anyway.
brilliant. So now we've been enticed to, perhaps reluctantly, but we're talking about this issue. So I think we should talk about it. Let's set some ground rules. I suggest that we call Akpabio God's will, if we're going to call Natasha Natasha. Can we- so it's a God's will versus Natasha um, debate. And of course, it's much bigger than that, as you pointed out, OAG, because you're saying that here, yeah, the pillow fight analogy is funny that, for upper class women, the oppression is pushing by their class position. Whereas if you're the receptionist in the Senate, or indeed the domestic worker in God's will's house, then there's a higher chance that the threats are much more severe, and the harassment might even take more violent forms. Emeka, where do you stand on this? I mean, do you feel some sympathy based on this for Natasha, in the face of threats from God's will? Do you feel like the jury is still out really on what happened? Do you think that it's misguided and a bit of a distraction to be drawn into this controversy? Where do you stand?
I mean, to be honest, for me, it's a bit of a distraction, even especially around kind of reportage. Instinctively, it's being framed as, a gender thing, whereas it's basically for me an institutional thing. So the reason why she's being hounded, if she's being hounded, or even receiving the support that she's receiving, is not necessarily because she's a woman who's alleged sexual harassment. If she felt indeed really slighted by alleged advancement or harassment, it
Right.
should have come much earlier than this. I'm not saying this to side with her detractors. There's a bit of time that has lapsed. So what's on the table today is that seats were rearranged and she felt slighted by that and decided to speak up.
Right, right, right.
In
So
doing so,
real privileges.
uh, yeah, but in doing so, she incurred the wrath of an institution that has become hegemonic in a certain sense, which explains why even women in the Senate aren't quite speaking up for her. So you have an Ireti Kingibe who was part of the ethics committee or whatever it's called that recommended her suspension. And then you have the wife of current president who was the senator herself not too long ago. speaking up, even if cryptically against her, so that leaves me wondering, okay, so if we're talking in terms of patriarchy, what's the role of women who are beneficiaries of patriarchy itself in in sustaining it? Okay, so the women who seem to be speaking for her are those who are not, or have never been in the hollow chambers. So that leaves me a bit reluctant to want to frame it, in the way that it's actually being framed. So I think that there's a power thing going on. I listened to our spokesman the other day who was insisting that she had the leadership of a really important committee, local content committee, taking off her, and that's why she's angry and that she's lashing out. So I guess that, I mean, for me, it's two privileged people, unfortunately, who are male and female fighting over. I could go a bit deeper and say even the dynamics. So when you bring in her husband, who is said to be friends with Godswill Akpabio, into the mix, the question I would love to ask is what kind of relationship do they have? Is it kind of friendship that you and I and OAG have, or is it like a boss, servant relationship where Akpabio is doing Akpoti-Uduaghan's husband favors, in a bid to kind of keep that relationship ticking, because there's also that form of patriarchy where men of less privilege are the receiving end, and if you go, in fact, that's the patriarchy that Nigeria understands.
But it sounds like the past few points you've made strongly support what she's fighting for. I mean, the fact that patriarchy um has a negative impact even on like men who are lower on the pecking order financially or otherwise, including her husband. The possibility that um a corrupt Senate, not so hallowed chambers, actually, might, if I might say, is allocating rewards based on who's kissing the ring. And the possibility, whether it's recent or in the past, that there actually was sexual harassment, all of this would suggest that she has a point to make here. So I might be missing something, but doesn't all this suggest that maybe there is something to pay attention
Don't get me
to?
wrong. I'm not suggesting that she doesn't have a point to make.
Okay.
I'm saying that I can't be burdened in any of the two parties. My position is right down the middle. So all I have said is basically to try and broaden the conversation so that it's not narrowed down to one or two things. It's a much broader conversation, given the players involved, the Senate as an institution, the two principal players, and those around them in terms of your family. So there's also got your wife who's coming and trying to say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I don't believe this story." You understand? For me, it's not a question of whether it happened or whether it didn't happen. I'm saying these things happen in this country and maybe even outside of this country. You understand? And that it gives us room to discuss the role of women who enforce patriarchy and the role of men who are often at the receiving end of patriarchy itself. And I think that those are fringe topics that aren't really captured in. Is Natasha saying the truth, or is she being hounded by men in the Senate? I think those things obfuscate those other real.
I buy that, and I think we should actually talk about men as victims of patriarchy and women as champions of patriarchy. But I would say that those are not as fringe. I mean, they might be fringe in the West, but I think the question of like women as champions of patriarchy and men's rights, etc., are actually very popular in Nigeria. Because in the moment you talk about feminism, the next response you will expect from a Nigerian man is like, yeah, but men also suffer. You know what I mean? Or like, oh, men aren't included. And I don't want to wave those responses away. I think there's something to be said, especially in the neoliberal economy and some of the adjustments that have been made with identity politics since the ruling class gave up on the previous mode of accumulation. So I think we should come back perhaps to the question of men suffering under patriarchy, women enforcing it. But I think maybe I want to dwell just for a moment longer on what might seem to a lot of people to be the core question. And maybe one way to phrase it is to say, is there something to be said for the attention that this case draws to the issue, the broader issue of sexual harassment? Like, given that that's undeniably an issue in our society, right? Then should we credit the media coverage in general for centering that as an issue? Or do you feel like they're centering it in the case of a ruling class woman actually does not ultimately benefit working class women at all? Like, do you feel like the fact that sexual harassment is now what we're talking about would not necessarily lead to any benefits for working class women? I'm curious what you guys feel about the potential impact of this discussion for women outside of the Senate, for women, Nigerian women more generally. Oji, how do you feel? Do you think there will be some trickle down, so to speak?
I don't think it'll change much for the woman on the streets.
Right.
Because again, why this lady is getting much attention like this is because she's a high-ranking woman in society. Look at the students that face sexual harassment in school. It will take effort and a lot of time before you can actually get one of them to come out. And thankfully, social media has been kind of decentralizing that space, and we've been hearing a bit more. But institutionally, things really don't seem to change. It's only the pushback you get, the real pushback you get, that is shaking the guys or the perpetrators are from women that have some sort of power.
Right.
That's the thing. A lot of cases go unheard or like probed when you see it's from like a poor background. The ladies from a poor background, they'll do it and nothing will happen. But this lady is holding the whole country down, and everyone's hearing about it. We're having opinions because simply she's a senator, and it is shaking the media space, and people can hear, and she has a voice. So that's why I think her case is in our faces. But I can guarantee you that there's a sexual harassment thing go undercover, or somebody using their power as an elite to push a lady.
How about the power of example? Like, seeing her speak up and seeing the response that seems to be kind of a knee-jerk response from the
I,
men. Don't you think for some younger women, for some working women, they might feel empowered to be like, wait a minute, actually I'm not alone in this situation, and there might be something for me to latch onto here. Like they might, I should speak up because other people are also speaking up.
Let me try and take a stab at this again.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything about the way this has been handled that is a deviation from the norm within the Nigerian society.
Mm.
Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan has been shut down. It's the same way thousands and millions of women before her have been shut down in workplaces for alleging sexual harassment,
Okay, she's been
right?
suspended. But
Yes.
as the conversation ended there, no, I mean, I think,
Yeah.
sparked a social backlash in some respects.
So I think what's different here is the press, that it's getting,
Right.
okay? And that's largely because of the institution involved, right?
Mm-hmm.
This thing happen in normal banks, offices, oil companies, and it's a big talk of town within that environment, but it doesn't get to the press.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But I don't think that because it's gotten to the press, the result has been any different. She's been suspended.
No,
What's
so
been
it's not so
argued?
much the result for her that I'm interested in. I
Mm,
guess it's the result for society and for women elsewhere in society. So you folks are going back to explaining that there's nothing new about what's happened to her. I guess, yeah, let's take that as read. But I'm saying, what next? I mean, what of the wider social impact? It- you know, does her speaking up change anything? Maybe that's the real question. Does her speaking up change anything? Does the focus that the media is given to this um have the potential to change anything from your perspective?
I don't. Well, that's what I'm saying. I don't see what it has changed. I mean, if she spoke up and she didn't get, I mean, she went to court,
Mm,
get to try and get an injunction to stop even the suspension,
mm,
didn't she? That didn't change anything. The law courts were in favor of the institution. So,
right.
in fact, I was reading somewhere in passing yesterday that the hearing has been rescheduled for maybe another 3 weeks. But
Right.
the suspension has come before
Okay,
the
so it's
verdict
not
of the
changed
court.
anything legally, and it's not changed anything in the Senate. But I mean, how about socially and culturally? I mean, does it have a social or cultural impact beyond the Senate and the legal basbos?
That's the point I'm making. I don't see what it has done in terms of impact. Tomorrow, somebody in that same Senate is going to sexually harass somebody, maybe deputy Senate president, maybe in the House of Rep. Yeah, I don't see how it changes. I don't see why if it changed. They say it cost. First of all, make even Senate President no even been hear that case, no being go even broach the issue.
Mm.
Maybe he don't step down. Do you understand? That's where that kind of pressure that gets him to
Yeah, yeah,
step
yeah. But
aside.
again, I think you're returning to institutional level changes or legal level changes. I'm really more interested in the wider cultural impact. As in, we've seen now an example of somebody in the highest office being challenged on gendered terms. And part of the problem with sexual harassment has historically been the silencing of victims, basically,
Hmm.
that you can't even articulate, like you can't even open your mouth and say this has happened. And suddenly somebody has opened their mouth on one of the largest stages of the country. Yes, the person has suffered institutional impacts, um, but in a way, the person has also become a bit of a cultural hero. So I'm wondering whether or heroine. Sorry.
Yeah, well, something came to my mind, and I was going to say it might sound funny. Bimbo,
Okay.
who yeah, me in Idris's Abdul Karim song, because supposed to be hero in sexual harassment where they harass him for school because I heard that it was a real story that the guy adapted to his song.
Okay.
But culturally, these things have not changed, and it's because of these institutions that
Mm,
arise.
yeah.
Yeah, so we might have bubbles here and there of people pushing back, but if it doesn't lead to that change, because the system has a way of re-ingraining and maintaining and stabilizing itself. So if that thing is not dismantled, you only see that anybody that speaks up will be pushed back and silenced and made an example out of. So if what I feel that what people will see is if someone like Natasha has spoken and she got shot down like that, then maybe she should just shut up and not say anything.
Right.
So
So
it's looking as if the institution might be winning on this one because if a clear example is not made out of the perpetrator or the alleged perpetrator of that sexual harassment, then people will be like, yeah, what's the reason for complaining? Like our apathy, voter apathy, and the apathy generally. We're going to vote. Does it won't even count? So what is it? We've complained. We've made
yeah,
media rounds.
but wouldn't it contribute at least to further delegitimizing the institution of the Senate? Because yes, of course, there are people who are like God's will is right, but there are also people who are like, no, as a matter of fact, the Senate looks stupid. They're not even like obeying their own standing order. The Senate is kind of in breach of the Constitution. There's all these arguments that based on the standing rules of the Senate, the maximum suspension period you can impose is 14 days. They've imposed 6 months, etc. So, all of these things, don't they contribute in some ways? I mean, I know that it doesn't have an immediate institutional impact, but in the psyche, in the public psyche or popular consciousness, like, doesn't this contribute to exposing the absurdity of these institutions? Or do you feel that people already know, as in that there's nothing more you can
Uh,
expose?
so I think that people already know
Right.
because this again, it's not a new case. It's been happening over and over again. Ladies in schools get harassed. It's not even almost. It is institutional.
Mm.
So what then is going to change? Like I feel like people would become they won't care so much. We
Mhm.
have social media now that blows this thing out. We can see it. Everyone, it's all in our faces. So it feels like it's the hot topic.
Right.
But institutionally, what is changing? Nothing has changed. Like this lady will have it. She has a voice by the virtue of where she's placed in society. She has a voice than the average lady. That's just what is playing out. And of course, it's not like, whoa, she's going to suffer anything that is unbearable. But some ladies on the lower rung of society would lose their job. They can get taken in custody, killed or anything like that. So it's different sides of the spectrum. But what I feel is it's institutional, and if it doesn't change on an institutional level, it'll get to a point where, of course, these elites they don't care about how they look or how we perceive them. They are delegitimizing themselves on a daily basis. The system is already delegitimized. Look at the voting, legislature, judiciary. They know, but they don't care because they are making money from it.
It can be argued that the delegitimization of the system has not reached a tipping point. In other words, that the people
I agree. I
who relate
agree
to it or who believe
because
in it or who think it's legitimate, who think the chambers are hallowed.
I
If
agree.
people
I
maybe
agree.
are more numerical or louder or, have grasped the levels of power more.
It's just been stripped bare to raw power. Anybody that has the power is the winner of the game. Brute force. So at this point in time, it's the guys at the top, the men that run the game. The ladies can come and chop because they are also high class ladies, but you have to play by the rules of what the men say. So there are some ladies that stay in the system long enough to imbibe that mentality and that thinking structure, such that when other ladies speak, they are the ones to check them and put them in line. Like, look,
I
this is
get
the
that. I
game.
get that. I get that. But like, look, I'm even very curious about America's take here too. I mean, you folks are saying, yeah, this has happened before, in the sense that women have spoken up in various sectors of society before to say that they were harassed or, were subject to gender-based discriminations. But has it actually ever happened at this level, at this stage? I mean, at the setting of the Senate, with the accusation being against the third most powerful in theory, constitutionally anyway, citizen in the country. I mean, this is maybe a bigger stage than we've seen in sexual or gender-based discrimination or harassment case play out before. So you think that has actually absolutely no significance at all for the struggle for women's rights? Or, I mean, you don't, there's nothing unprecedented about this?
Let me just say one thing before Emeka comes in. Emeka, I'm sorry.
Right.
There was Obasanjo, an alleged messing around with some ladies in the Senate and all this Itagiwa, all this there were cases like that floating around. So this thing is not new. I don't have the details yet, or I don't have it in my mind, but there was accusation floating around about Obasanjo and some ladies in the presidency or the Senate at some point in time. So these things have been going on around. And although social media has not been as widespread as it is now, but it happened back then too.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, there were definitely allegations and like rumors, but I mean, for the person who's been victimized or allegedly victimized, pointing the finger directly on the kind of national stage, that feels somewhat unprecedented to me. But I don't know, Maggie, your thoughts? I mean, I'm still kind of harping on this question of the wider cultural impact. I
Yeah,
agree,
yeah.
institutionally, impacts are limited. Yeah, well, what do you think?
So let me try this approach, yeah, and then flip it around and ask you this question. Do
Hmm.
you see that there's any way of measuring the cultural impact of
Hmm.
this? I feel reluctant to call it a scandal because it doesn't even seem to me as though it's a scandal, you know.
Okay, let's call it
But
controversy.
yeah, this controversy, yes. Is there any way of measuring the cultural impact
Hmm.
of this controversy without gauging, the institutional response to it, given the circumstances?
Okay, should I answer?
Yes,
No,
please.
no, no, of course. I mean, I think there would be numerous potential ways of trying to assess
Okay.
cultural impact. I mean, they wouldn't necessarily be easy, but like I think you can, you know, assess whether or not the discourse on social media, for instance. I mean, I hate that, but that's one like maybe easier option. Whether it shifts on the question of sexual harassment, because there might be people who previously would have said, nah, this thing is not really as serious as people make it seem. Like, do women even really get harassed that much these days? Or like, why does feminism matter? Like, why are we importing Western constructs? Who might be like, actually, it's kind of crazy that somebody has claimed to be harassed and it's just like being entirely dismissed and a normal process of like the accuser recusing themselves from, the accuser not being the judge. That normal process, which, I think common sense would require, has not been fulfilled here. I think that might strike some people as a bit shocking. I mean, and it would be possible if one wanted to study it to assess like what those kinds of people are saying on social media. I'm not sure that they have immediately changed sides on the topic, but that would be one way to assess cultural impact. How journalists are thinking about this would be another way to assess cultural impact. Then, of course, like the more important, probably, and more interesting question would be, yeah, like how working women or poor women are reading this, as in whether they're reading this as cautionary tale, reason to not speak up, or whether they're reading this as, what, good on her for saying something that a lot of other people would have wanted to say. That would be worth exploring, because if it is the latter, as in if women are reading this as um good on her, and finally someone is saying what a lot of us are experiencing, then I think that's worth a lot, even if it's come at the cost of her seat, or even if the rules of the game in the Senate haven't immediately changed. I think it's still worth something for women outside of the chamber, the ordinary Nigerian women, the working women, to be like, yeah, okay, we have somebody who's said something out loud that we wish we'd been able to say. How would you measure that? I don't know, surveys or something. Um, but yeah, I mean, that's the kind of thing I suppose I'm addressing when I'm raising the question of cultural impact.
Okay, let me just run this by you. Something that I've heard, that I've picked up, that I push, that I've begun, or that I'm pushing back against. Okay.
Hmm.
So one thing I've heard as a fallout of this is that Natasha, it almost seems as though people were saying, "What's she talking about? This
Right.
is a woman, and this is the story out there. This is a woman that has 6 children by 4 men, or 6 children by 6 men, depending on who you're listening to. And the connotation of that is that she's promiscuous, you know. So if it's a PR job, that's what's sticking. That's what the commentary is. And I'm not speaking about the press. I'm speaking, people who gather around the newspaper, people who bring up the topic in a beer parlor.
Hmm.
And this is the Nigerian culture, And so somebody said this to me 2 days ago, and my retort is, but men have 4 kids by 4 different women, or 5 kids by. I mean, why is that not used against them? Or why is that not used to disparage them, or yeah, for lack of a better word. But
Right.
that's where the conversation is being held. So even when people go at Akpabio, what you hear is that that's not news. That's who Akpabio is.
Right, that is an
Yeah,
asshole.
yeah, that's what you hear. I mean, that's what you hear. So
Yeah.
that this sounds like what Akpabio can do. Word on the street was that when he was governor, they used to move girls in buses between cities, just to go and, I mean, that's that, but so that's
So he runs a kind of
if you
industrial sexual harassment in operation,
and that, okay,
allegedly.
at best, what it is that he has graduated from, young school girls in the universities who, um, satisfy maybe his sexual urges or satisfy, but that's the allegation that's being put out, there,
Right.
as it were. And these are not stories that are new to anybody in terms of the cultural. If we're talking about what the culture thinks about it. So let me make I leave them there, because I don't want to talk to one way to put me in trouble.
Right. So you feel somewhat silenced. You don't want to speak up against the culture, but isn't that precisely what Natasha has done here? So shouldn't we celebrate? Shouldn't I mean, you in a podcast, in a left podcast, feel hesitant to address the issue at hand. Her in the Senate, in the full glare of the national media, has raised this issue. I mean, so in a way, isn't she doing our work for us?
No, 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 no. I'm not having. I'm not. I don't even have any hesitations to,
Okay.
But I'm. So the line I'm crossing down is what's being said about Akpabio, right? I don't want to cross that line and say, okay, that he's a pervert and this is what he's known for. I'm just saying this is what's being said. So is that culture that I'm addressing? The culture.
Okay.
So if we're talking about what's the cultural impact of this, and if I'm going to gauge it from what that I have heard on the street, even though that's a very small sample size, right? I'm saying that it hasn't shifted anything.
Okay.
People are saying this is what people are saying, and so I think maybe what I take from what I'm saying is that I'm a bit irritated by what I'm hearing people say,
Yeah, right.
which suggests to me that in this controversy never changed the worldview.
Yeah,
Say,
gotcha.
say
No,
any woman we
but
don't
yeah,
get
does it have the
4 kids from.
potential? Does it have the potential to change the worldview? Because if she remains outside of the Senate for 6 months, then she's going to be doing the media rounds. Um, then the topic in theory will remain in our discourse sphere. She might even get some of the kind of social movement force or NGO force to put some weight behind her. Yeah, I mean, do you see any potential? She might even arise. Her profile as a political figure in the national scale might even rise. I mean, if she's seen as a kind of cause celeb. So is that you don't think that potential is there?
Is there? The potential is always there. I mean, every moment is always pregnant. This isn't it? Without preempting what she would do next, which is why I go back to where I'm starting from. This is a controversy between people of privilege, right? I, from where I'm sitting right now, I don't see her throwing away all of those privileges
Right.
to go out on a limb
Too
for
much
the
of a gamble.
cause of, yeah, I don't quite see that. I'll be shocked if she does go down that path. In fact, she would have won my respect for a very long time if she does. So that's, I, I guess what I'm saying is that she hasn't made that move. So
Right.
where I think where the conversation is coming ahead of what she might be able to do, is what the potential is. I don't know if I'm making any sense. Yeah, but
Okay.
Let me let me let me see for her to go out on a limb for the for the well-being of the general women folk. That's it. Let me draw that to point because if she stays on this PR thing and then it's all about me, what it to do is just focus on her alone, and then there's not going to be any institutional change. Like, for example, we mentioned social movements. Is she at the mental level or oriented towards doing stuff like that, which will remove her from the center of things and then place women generally, be it lower class, upper class, at the center of the struggle for the betterment of the women folk. So I don't think she has that kind of orientation to do stuff like that, So people of privilege, you always want to be at the center of stuff. It'll always be about them, and whenever they get a pat on the back or some sort of remuneration or gift or grants, or okay, yeah, we've heard you're right. They're just gonna probably get more contracts, more benefits, and maybe they consider her for a bigger post or another committee next time just to say sorry. But where does that leave the woman selling pepper on the streets? Where does that leave girls that came out and said that their lecturers harassed them in school? Are they the ones gonna just fold their arms by or feel like this Natasha is talking on behalf of them? I don't think so, So it's just that class thing is very, very, it's a huge part of this, as much as it is institutional.
So, I mean, that's quite a strong statement and understandable statement. And, one could say, therefore, that for Men Against Patriarchy, MAP, which of course could be an alternative name for our podcast, the
Map.
the Godswill versus Natasha saga is not yet the call to action for us, or it doesn't yet point the way forward for radical feminist transformation in Nigeria. I mean, I think that's probably fair to say. I think, in the last minutes of the show, I'm really curious about some of the points what Emeka was referring to as fringe topics that were made earlier that I think are worth exploring. So I will say that our take from a map perspective will probably be enriched, if we actually have feminists on the show, and we plan to. As a matter of fact, the invitations did not yield the results this time, but stand by for more conversations. And
why don't we just put out an open invitation now
yeah,
for the
well,
rest of
yes.
this?
I mean, of course, there are people who we've invited more directly, but among the listenership, if they're also, we're going to be biased and say if they're women, as a matter of fact, who are keen to come on and challenge the perspective they've heard here, or raise other perspectives that haven't been articulated here, we'd be very welcome to that. So, from a point of view of men against patriarchy, um, but we should probably come up with a better acronym eventually. But yeah, I mean, I think in the last few minutes, it's worth returning to this issue Micah has raised. For instance, I think the one that perhaps is a little less controversial is the one about men in the patriarchal order. The other one, which is, women as enforcers of patriarchy, is of course something that is undeniably a factor, but can be misconstrued more easily. So I don't know if that, it's up to you, as a matter of fact, Amaka, to decide which of these, or whether you want to take both of them. But is there any element of that question that you want to elaborate on?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if this is an elaboration, but I mean, so it's I think it's a season of madness in different hollow chambers. So if you move this, you move the dial and then go southwestward to Lagos,
Mm.
a group of members of Lagos State House of Assembly came together to impeach. I don't know if that's the word.
Which are
Or
majorly men.
with I mean, you hear them now. They don't want their guy again. So the guy they respect them. They make him get the fuck out. Get out, man.
So they came to impeach the
And
Speaker of the House of Assembly, who's a man.
yeah, yeah, who's the man? Largely men, Obasa, and handed it over to a woman,
Right, right,
you
right,
know,
right,
by almost unanimous decision.
right.
Okay. And the lady Miranda took office, and
And
history
I'm
was
gonna
made.
assume Miranda is her first name. Just
I don't even know what her first name is.
I'm gonna try to see.
Sounds like something
I, need-
from a Shakespeare.
I need to get Emeka cancelled before this show's over. I'm
I
working
don't
on
know
it.
what that.
Let me
I
have
don't
it.
know
That's her
that.
name now.
Yeah, but you notice how we insist on calling women by their first names. But anyway, over back to the
Mojisola, be like, Mojisola.
Mojisola Miranda. So Miranda is her last.
oh,
Yeah.
okay, fine,
So
fine. So I'm yeah, so, yeah.
yeah, now
Let's be
you
not
now
wrong.
you now you owe me one good and
Yeah, me
one
fond
good.
do. Yeah.
But you see that's it. I mean, it's the theater of the absurd. However you look at it, and then her tenureship only lasts like just lasts as long as it takes Obasa to
Like
come
3 weeks.
from America.
Right,
you know.
right.
And the next thing we're hearing, the man has been reinstated by the
Mm,
same people who said that they were tired of him. So the question then becomes, what went down,
yeah.
right? And he didn't tender any apology, but so I mean, I really, so that's why I say it's not probably I'm not answering your question, but how that situation complicates the one that we've just been
Mm,
discussing. It astounds me, to be honest. That's where they say, when I agree with people who say Nigeria, if they explain Nigeria to you and you understand them, they don't really explain them well,
right.
because it's madness.
Yeah, right, right. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, OG, any thoughts on the question therefore of
Uh,
men, men
I just felt like,
or even the
yes,
Miranda issue itself?
for in Lagos, and as crazy as it might sound, they try to put up this facade of progressive politics.
Right.
And the Mojisola Miranda lady just happened to be a positive, not a victim, but a beneficiary
Right.
of that tug of power amongst the government or governor advisory council
Mm.
and Obasa.
GAC, GAC, who are also
GAC,
friends of
GAC.
all the sponsors
Yeah, so
of
following
the
the
program.
incident closely, when the thing happened, they said Obasa, at some point was disrespectful to them. He kept them waiting when they presented budgets. He didn't approve it on time. Essentially, this was an ego play
Right.
amongst the GAC people or between GAC and Obasa. And they wanted to just teach him a very strong lesson and let him remember that, look, we are still the guys that call the shots. So when he traveled, they just orchestrated that little lesson for him. I don't think in Mojisola Miranda's mind, I don't think she saw it as something that might have been permanent
Right.
because our president is for Obasa. So I think when Obasa came back, he made some rounds to Abuja and went to just, straighten things up there. So the word came back that, put this guy back. But so I think she benefited in a warped manner from the crazy system that operates, which some people might hold as you see, yeah, a lady now is becoming a beneficiary of this. And that is what the people that want to propagate and enshrine the system, that is what they hold on to. And they'll say, look, this is a lady, this, that, but again, in good and bad, there's the good and bad part, or the opposing sides that come, the opposing negatives that come and just crystallize out. And that's what we've seen with this lady that just became stuff, because it was the same guys and men that told her to step down, and no democratic in quote process was followed to get you off. And there was no, I don't think they followed the real.
She resigned.
Yeah, she had to resign. So there was no process in place that fairly took you out of that office. So some men have called you to the office or wherever they meet or met and told you, lady, come on, bounce. And yeah, so you resigned. So that's the system again showing you that what it gives, it will take.
And nobody, and I'll go out on a limb and say this: nobody by way of feminist stood up for her.
Rose up. And Desmondella was there crying anyway. Let's put it out there.
Yeah, well,
Desmondella shed a tear. He shed a tear or two on that matter.
Wait, who shed the tear?
Desmond Elliott.
Oh
he
man.
broke down. But I don't know whether he thought he was in character. I don't know whether he saw that as a move.
But what,
It's
what was
just dumb. Maybe they don't put setting in place so they
what
chop
was he
money
crying
and
about? I mean, he was crying about her exit? He was crying about her entrance, or I couldn't.
Exit,
exit.
but if like they rub onion for an eye.
In the craze, maybe he don't say go chop money.
I
Say
mean,
as this lady
we are
don't lay
talking
there.
here about a
Say
professional actor and perhaps one of the finest to do it. So,
I'm telling you. I'm
um,
telling you.
no, okay, but all of this leaves me a bit confused about our ultimate lesson here. So, are we are we saying that um are we saying that basically we saw the ultimate expression of patriarchy with the GAC sunning both men and women in Lagos? Is that basically the lesson here? Are we saying that women were and in the process of that, I guess point two that um, women, of course, the women who are in these verified chambers find themselves having to sometimes play the patriarchal game by leaning into a kind of just help me out here. So what lesson I guess can we take out of this, and then how might you tie it back into the God's will versus Natasha goings on?
I think that the fallouts of these controversies, if we might call them that, is you know often centers around interests and
Mm,
around power and interest and who's controlling what levels of power. You know, so that it's really hard to, or a bit premature to discuss um them in terms of the gender divide or feminism, even because even I think that even these feminists are slow to to go all out, all out for women on these issues, because I think that general feeling is that not them too, you know.
mm,
I think what carries more weight is if this was happening in a hospital, for instance, between a CMD and maybe a resident doctor or something of the sort, or in the bank between. I think that that would probably have the tendency to rally more people or feminists or sympathizers around, But when at that level, it doesn't seem to me like anybody. I think it's more like we're following this controversy and let's see where it leads. because I made that statement bearing in mind that, somebody like Obi Ezekwesili has come out to stand behind Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan, right? But I didn't see that same energy with Miranda, maybe because in terms of standing, the Lagos State House of Assembly is a bit, of a lower caliber house than the Senate, or maybe it's big, for the senators, but you see, so that there's that lack of consistency, even though I think that the Miranda one would have been a more classic example of where the feminists come to show that, okay, Western, because it
Oh,
doesn't
no,
make
no, no,
sense.
no, no, but I'm not sure that's true, America, because it could be argued that the Miranda situation was more obviously just like within party squabble, like them kind of situation that had much less to do with the lives of ordinary women, whereas something to do with sexual harassment, is a core issue that almost all women can relate to, and that cuts to the heart of some of the traditional causes of feminists. So, I mean, it seems like the Miranda issue is precisely the kind that shouldn't interest us and shouldn't interest feminists, whereas the Natasha one is, isn't it?
I
Yeah.
I think both of them should interest us. Okay. But I think that if we're looking at cultural impact, right, in a country where the inclusivity or inclusiveness of women is way below par, that Miranda was voted, had the vote of confidence of her peers,
Mhm.
and was made to lead the house, or giving, that vote of confidence to be able to lead. It showed that, that a woman could rise to that level, something that's never happened. I don't Okay, maybe it's happened in one or two other states. I think it's happened in Anambra before now, but it showed that it was something that, that as a society, that we should aspire to. And I thought that, she should have been backed,
Mm.
and it should have been harder for Basa to come back.
Mm. I've-
You, but I mean, I think it was even a breeze for Basa to come back,
yeah.
which doesn't very augur well for what Lagos claims to be, or even democracy itself. In the case of Natasha, we're still at the level of an allegation, right? And you would have to give, no matter what I feel about Akpabio, I'll give him some benefit of doubt, because this is what's being alleged,
Yeah, sure.
right? So in that sense, I hold on to the fact that, they're both important. But if you ask me to throw my weight behind one, if I had a choice, I'd have wanted to throw my weight behind Miranda, to be honest.
No, 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 but is the Miranda thing really a feminist issue?
I think what undermines the Miranda's case is the circumstances
Yeah,
or around which she got that power. It didn't emanate organically.
yeah.
So that one don't already undermine them from the start. So when they came and told her, look, this is the scenario that you came in with, it's time to go. Like it just happened as an anomaly. Someone was being taught a lesson and you benefited from that.
Yes, yes. Somebody who was imposed by a council of shadowy men
She
that
was
run things in
imposed.
Lagos.
No,
It's
she wasn't imposed. I don't agree that she was imposed. No, I
okay.
don't agree.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, the
What
people, the people
Okay.
made allegations. They made allegations. Do
they
you
made
understand?
allegation against Obasa that I was stealing
They
money.
made allegations against Obasa. They
Yeah.
made allegations of financial misappropriation, which is an allegation,
No,
and
she
it
was
was not.
vetted by her peers. So you're right that she wasn't
Yeah, and
necessarily.
yeah, and the one that I know that I don't need anybody to prove is that Obasa na prick. You understand?
oh,
They know they respect even in peers for the House of Assembly. That one I don't need anybody to explain that, and that's even grounds for removal.
Right, right,
You
right.
know, so it's first among equals. That's the setup in those kinds of places. But he didn't see, believes anybody equal to her, and then remove her. Do you
Yeah.
understand? So bringing him back. So what we're saying is, because I heard the way you say Gak follow bring Obasa back.
He
No, sure.
don't go beg. He don't go beg.
So
He
Gak
don't go.
follow
That's what I'm saying. That if it was an independent institution, and if an
and I'm
institution
not
that
sure say
really,
Gak, woman
what's
no
that?
dey the Gak. I'm
No,
not sure
woman
say
know the guy. Woman know the. I noticed a woman. I'm not sure, but they're largely men. Whatever the case
Yes,
is.
presumably the women there
Yeah, yeah.
extreme
They are
minority.
yeah, they're largely men. So I feel that that structure is what has undermined Miranda's case because she had a lot of support, no doubt, from the guys in Lagos State House of Assembly. But because of that party structure and that institution that Lagos State has enshrined, it was easy to just get out of the way instantly. Okay, back to status quo. Obasa has come to beg. Yeah, he made quite a lot of trips, and he was confident that these guys, most of the guys on the government advisory council, they were behind him. So okay, I made this mistake. I've gone to prostrate. They've told me I'm coming back. So Miranda, just get out. And she did. It was very
oh,
easy. There was no.
it's also, I think it's also bigger than begging. I think that as a political, in terms of political value, Obasa has more political value than even Sowolu.
Yes. I mean,
When
that's
it comes to
the
Agege
Yes,
constituency and all,
yeah,
he's their main man.
largest constituency in Lagos.
removing that
Yeah,
kind of person get
who
cost,
shoots their foot.
and
Yeah,
yeah,
No,
so
no, no,
yeah,
no, no.
yeah.
So look, this was, so for the listeners' benefit, as a way to wrap up, this was the original topic we were going to actually discuss today. I mean, the question of godfatherism, basically. Um, but then, and I suppose father um is itself something that isn't entirely unrelated to the gender question. But we then got drawn into the more prominent gender debate that's going on in society today. And I think it's worthwhile that we broached it, at least opened the question, even if not resolved it. So I think that's worth stating as we try to close the conversation down. And I think that, in saying that, it's worth saying then that both topics are topics that we do intend to revisit going forward. I think we've opened up the conversation around um, the Senate and Natasha and Godswill, and as you said, it's something we want to revisit. But I think, yeah, the question of godfatherism in Lagos, how it's evolved, and nationally, are topics worth revisiting too. So I mean, we've kind of run ahead of, or run past our usual mark. Um, but yeah, I think it's just worth signposting that these are, ongoing discussions that we're having, and that, we certainly appreciate you joining. So if you have comments, as we said earlier, if there are things that you think we've missed or have misanalyzed, especially with respect to what Emeka has been saying, then definitely please reach out to us, and let's hear from
go
you.
put me for
Uh,
sport, Abi.
yes, definitely. But with that being said, I mean, are there any final concluding thoughts? Any one word or two word messages to the world, to the women of the world, the working women of the world, or to indeed to the men who run the patriarchal system under which we all subsist? Final.
Well, if there has to be any change, they have to be a part of it and really be a part of it, not allowing for some crisis to bubble up from the elite or trickle down from the elites before you can then benefit from it. There must be organizations at local levels such that there will be a feminist broad base and then which can move as a single unit or entity to fight and ensure justice for the women folk, regardless of their class in society. So
There
that's what I feel.
won't be any trickle down social cause.
No, it won't be true. That to be bubble up.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Megan.
I think that my own final word would be that I figure that Miranda's case would have been a classic um, opportunity for, if there was a very vibrant social movement in Nigeria, for 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 social movements to have made a point, because if at the organizational level you had organizations which could rally together in support of her across constituencies in
Mhm.
Lagos State, then you would have given Obasa a good run for his money. And that
Right. Right.
it would have been a perfect, example to state that no one individual is bigger or is supposed to be bigger than an institution or a group of, if you like, godfathers or who go by the GAC acronym. If we're going to begin to shatter some of these illusions, then it should start with such ad hoc committees like GAC and really tell them that power belongs more to the people than to a bunch of fools in Caliban.
Mhm.
Is map versus GAC.
Exactly. So yeah, that excellent. Map versus GAC is what I want on a t-shirt. So that you have to explain to everyone who you walk across what exactly
What it means.
what the acronyms mean. But yeah, speaking of MAP, on behalf of MAP, I suppose my final words would be Happy International Women's Day,
Yeah.
listener. And thank you for a fantastic conversation.